So, welcome to the very first episode of All the Way Apprenticeships. All the Way Apprenticeships is all about how apprenticeships work, my story, everything you need to know about apprenticeships, where to get information, and just the good stories basically that make up apprenticeships in the UK. So, for those international listeners, apprenticeships are in essence a way of being able to work full time and study at the same time, almost like being an intern, like a paid intern, if we have any international listeners. And the best way I can describe it is you go to work 4 days a week and you study for one day. So it's almost like an 80-20 principle where 80% of the week you work, 20% is you study. And at the end of that time, you get a qualification, ideally, in the area that you've been working in. And that's exactly the route that I decided to go down. And I wanted to talk about that story and my journey so far from where I was as an apprentice to where I am today. And I was excited about sharing this story. And I'm excited about where it's brought me and some of the experiences I've had. And I just really wanted to go into a little bit of detail about the highs and lows and everything in between. It's been good and I wouldn't change a thing. And so let's get into it. In 2008, I left school, quite average grades actually, B's and C's across the board. My grades were when I left school. So I was quite an average student. I didn't really try that hard because I could just go into a test and naturally come out with like a 70 or 80% in it without really studying too hard. So I just thought, well, that's good enough for me. That's as far as it'll go for. Do you know what I mean? So when it came to studying, I kind of just did enough to get the grades that I wanted. I was predicted all B's and C's, so I was like, yeah, let's just stick with those. In 2008, I left school, and like most people, I didn't really know what I wanted to be or do. So over time, I just kind of was looking for different answers. What do I want to be when I'm older? I have no idea. So I just kind of did what the next best thing is for people who don't know what they want to do is just go to my folks. And my folks said to me, yeah, we're going to make you into an accountant. You're good at maths, so just go down that route. I said, okay. And that's exactly what happened. I left school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went into accounting because, just based on my grades, I was like, yeah, I can do maths and that's it. And I didn't know where to get started really because after leaving school, I knew sixth form was not for me. I didn't want to go into accounting to do sixth form, or I didn't want to go to do sixth form to do accounting. So I thought, what other options do I have? I want to at least explore them all. And in Derby, where I'm from, there was a place called Connections in town, in Derby city centre. And Connections are a organisation that help young people find, or any age, help people find jobs. They give advice, sometimes counselling, lots of different services, just like a community service. And the area I went in for is to learn about what options I had as a career. So I was like, well, I like working with my hands, so I was thinking design technology, being a joiner, or I like to do maths, so I looked at all the different options I had. And ultimately, I met a woman there called Sue Evans, and she gave me the best direction in what I should do. And she helped me come to the conclusion that I should try accounting. So my dad suggested it. Sue kind of helped me get to the stage where I was like, yeah, let's go for accounting. So I decided to jump on it. And Derby didn't really have it at the time, or I applied too late. So I went to Burton College, which is just outside of where I live. So I went to Burton College to do accounting, and I'm enjoying it. I passed the first year, passed the second year, and I think I can get used to this. I'm getting the hang of this. I can stay in it. And then 2009, so after about a year of going to college, 2009, I actually got myself the apprenticeship. So I started the actual qualification part, which is the 20%, but I needed the 80%, the job to go with it, and I didn't have that at the time. So I got my very first job in 2009, and it was working for a very small accountancy firm, literally about 20 people, including cleaners, working for the whole firm. And I'm learning all about VAT returns, I'm learning all about tax returns, and then eventually got into sole trader and small limited company accounts. So I'm learning all the ins and outs of how to work accountancy, just from the ground up, basically. And they weren't turning over huge amounts of money in these businesses, but I was learning how to really how to sort the taxes out, everything from VAT to corporation tax. And this is where, in this company, is where I learned how to graft, because there was people in there who would, if you started your day at 9 o'clock, there would be people in there from 8 o'clock. And that, to me, was where I first learned that you got to show up early every day just to even compete, because I'm quite a competitive person anyway. But even as an apprentice, I showed up early. And if you wanted to do, your bit, show up at 8. If you showed up at 5 to 9, people would look at you funny, like, why are you late? And I loved that. I did like that, because it showed me how to be an early bird. And in the early days, it was just, stay late kind of mentality. Start early, end late. And I just used it as an opportunity to soak in as much as I possibly could. So I'm learning as much as I can. And I'm the T-boy. I'm running after files here, there, and everywhere, like headless chicken. I'm busy. I'm swept off my feet. I'm not just kind of there to, twiddle my thumbs. I was really getting into the thick of it. I was there doing everything from cleaning out the stock cupboards of the records from different accounts. I did absolutely everything I could to try and look for different people's accounts. And just to work at my best, to the best of my ability, doing everything that I was given. And I was always encouraged to try and do more. I encouraged myself to try and do more all the time. And this is back in 2009 when there's a recession going on. So I'm working full time on my apprenticeship. I'm studying part time at college, and also I'm working part time at Zizzi's, Italian restaurant. So yeah, shout out to Zizzi's. I miss you guys. So working at Zizzi's, working a full-time job in accounting, and also studying part-time, still accounting. And I remember getting my first paycheck from my accounting role, and I remember just buying driving lessons, trainers, all the kind of daft stuff that you'd buy, as an 18-year-old. And I remember me and my friends were discussing what we were going to do as a holiday, and we decided to go to Ayia Napa. So one of the first things I wanted to do as well was pay to be able to go to Ayia Napa with my friends. That was an incredible experience as well. Just be able to say, look, I pay for this myself. My friends are at sixth form, having to ask mummy and dad for money to be able to go, whereas I was like, I don't need to ask, I can just pay for it myself, which is brilliant. And it just gave me, ultimately, while I was working, it just gave me a huge grounding into the world of work, like showing up with a shirt and tie, learning how to really just make the most of your working life, how to get along with people. It showed me how to, just put the graft in, because there was lots of people out there who were really doing well in this, and they were working really, really hard, so why not you? And it even got to the stage where one of the guys would show up at sometimes 6:30 in the morning. He would be there, and because I'm quite competitive as well, I'd be like, I want to show up at 6:30. So some days I would get there just as early as those guys, because in my head I was trying to aim for the stars and try and I'm in the world of work, so I'm trying to do my best, get to the top, do everything I can to really improve. And I started off quite well. And in 2010, so I'm working full-time, Zzz's, working in accounting and studying. And in 2010, I fell incredibly ill, and I needed an operation on my stomach. And it wrote me off for about 6 weeks. I couldn't work, I couldn't really walk. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the operation itself, but yeah, it threw me off about 6 weeks. And I had this operation in September, October time, and in the accounting world, from November to January is like the really busy periods. Any accounting firm, because they need to get all the self-assessments done by the 31st of January. So obviously most clients are panicking, even though they've had April to get all their stuff in, all their records in. They bring them in November, December time. So we're rushed off our feet, working extra hours, working longer hours, working twice, even harder than we already were, and it's manic. So I had this operation around September, October time. Now, bearing in mind, I needed 6 weeks to recover properly. And it was getting into this November period, and my sister was getting married at the time. So my recovery was going into the November bit. And obviously work are really busy at the time. They're work rushed off their feet because they're a man down as well, and people are picking up my work and all this kind of stuff. So when I came back in, middle of December, end of November, start of December, my sister got married, went to the wedding, and I was okay to go, and came back and I was working full time. And bearing in mind, I didn't get eased into working, I was just straight hit the ground running. Now, the challenge was, because I was just working so much and going for it, I didn't really recover properly. And every now and again there would be like follow-up appointments at the doctor's, and I purposely wouldn't go because, I'm thinking to myself, no, I've got to get back to work, and I've just got to work, and I really neglected my health, and that was my fault. And I worked my back off, to be fair. I worked my, worked my, my a little behind off. And I remember, we added to the team as well because work was getting even busier. So I remember one new apprentice came along. So after I'd been there about, a year or so, a new apprentice came along, and it was my job to help train and get him used to the work. So we're all working hard, and again, as I said, I wasn't 100% back to my fighting fit state how I was before, but I was still trying to get back to where I was, all while trying to help train this young man as well with me. Anyway, as I was working hard, and I remember even on January 2011, we went back on the 4th of January, and I worked 27 days straight, and I was working Saturdays full day, like 8 till 4, and I was working Sunday the same 8 till 4, which was really tough because, again, I wasn't 100% who I was, and I was, it was exhausting, really exhausting. So I was working full time, and had to drop the shifts as well at Z's as well. But that was really tough. So just to get us over the line for the 31st of January, the self-assessment dates. After that happened, we're still working, still trying to make up the hours that I'd missed as well from, while I was off in that 6-week recovery period. I remember in August of 2011, I get pulled on to an office on a Friday afternoon, and my manager at the time and the head of the firm pulls me into a room and says, "Oh, Simeon, since you've been back, we love having you around. You're a nice guy. We like you. Got great attitude and everything. But since you've been back from your operation, you've just not been the same. and we're concerned and all this kind of stuff. And by the end of the conversation, they said, Simeon, this is your last day. The lad who you've been helping to train and get used to things is your replacement. And today's your last day. If you shut down your computer, you don't need to worry about anything else. That's it. And I just remember shaking in the car park afterwards, because I was thinking, I worked so hard to really get back to where I was before, when I first started, and doing everything I could to try and make up the ground that I'd missed, because especially in the busy period when everyone was really working hard. And I just as I say, I just remember just shaking in the car. I struggled to drive home because I was just shaking that much. I was gutted. I was really broken. And then I get home, and it was about 3:00 on a Friday, and my dad's like, "You're home early." And I told him, and he was just like, "Look, we go again, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine." But that was the most scariest drive home I'd had, because in the back of my mind I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to tell my dad I've failed. I'm only 18, 19 years old, about to turn 19, and that's the first time I've experienced failure. And I thought it just started a really bad process for me of negative thinking towards myself. And along with that, I hated apprenticeships. I really hated apprenticeships. I thought to myself, I've worked so hard, tried my best. I even, as I say, missed hospital appointments and checkups to just see if I was okay, just because I didn't want to miss any time working, because I was trying to get back to where I was going to. And I wanted to quit so much. I didn't want to do accounting anymore. I said, I don't want to do this anymore, because I was about 3/4 of the way of completed my apprenticeship, that in terms of the actual qualification part. And my dad said, "Look, I know you feel like this now, but just get it under your belt. Just finish the qualification and get it under your belt. Even if you feel like, do you know what, I don't want to do accounting anymore, just finish it, get it under your belt, so that you have it back to fall back on." Because as I say, I was thinking, right, I don't want to do accounting anymore at all. It's not something that I'm passionate about, but I still like to just work hard anyway. So that's what I chose to do. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and you can imagine, after just coming back from operation, you're not 100% yourself, and you've just been let go of your job. So going towards an interview for my next role, because all I know is accounting, so the only roles I can go for are accounting jobs. So I'll go for full-time accounting jobs again in these interviews, and it was awful, because how do you tell someone, because usually the question they ask is, where was you in your last employment? And I just had to be straight, and I was like, look, I got sacked, and it was just awful. Having to say that, because every interview I would get to that part and I would just freeze, because that's the only way I could really deliver that. And bearing in mind, this was the time 2009, 10, 11, we was on the back of a recession, so jobs weren't even that booming at the time anyway. So it was quite tough. It was really quite tough. But I kept going, and I kept going for interviews, even when I kept getting no. And even one interview I got, I'm not going to say the name of the firm, but I got laughed out of the actual interview itself. And that to me was like the moment I was just like, it's just so demoralising, and my confidence was at an all-time low at that point. And at one stage, I really hated the fact that I'd trained, this young lad who's around my age, and I helped train him up to take my job. And I just thought it was just awful. Like, And I didn't even know that was going on behind the scenes, behind my back. Like they kind of, it's almost like, it felt like in hindsight, that's what they were planning on doing the whole time. And I didn't realise that. And my thoughts in the back of my mind was, even when I was going for these interviews, was this just isn't for me. And I don't want to do this. And I just remember thinking to myself, is this really for me? And I was just questioning myself all the time, because I'm trying to work hard, I'm trying to do my best, and I just couldn't keep it up. So, meanwhile, while this is all going on, I'm having to go back to the doctors now, just for checkups to make sure I'm okay. And I even remember when I was 12 years old, because this is a condition I've been dealing with for a long time. Even when I was 12 years old, I remember a doctor in Nottingham asking me, what do you want to be when you're older? This is when I'm 12 years old. And I said, I'm going to go into accounting. I'm going to be an accountant. And he looked at me so puzzled and said, but you're a people person. And I didn't really understand at the time. I was like, well, I'm going to go into accounting. And he, as I say, he just looked really puzzled at me. And so I carried on going to college and carried on studying, even though I haven't got a job. I go and get temporary job after temporary job. And it was just very short contracts, just doing little bits of accounting here and there. Because bearing in mind, as I say, we're coming off the back of a recession. There's not too many jobs about there, but there's still little bits of work here and there. And I just wanted to get my experience up in different environments anyway. So I was doing all these different temporary contracts. And at the end of every contract, it would get to the exact same thing. Like, we like you, but there's not enough work. We like you, but there's not enough work, so we're going to have to let you go. And I would just finish the contract and I would move on to the next one. So I was doing I was working in all sorts of environments as well. So I was working in, I remember working in a extreme sports store. I remember working in a mortgage advice company. All these different temporary, all quite varied contracts here, there and everywhere. Going interview after interview, just temporary contract after temporary contract. And I finally landed myself a permanent job in August 2011, I got let go, and I was doing temporary contract after temporary contract, just a few months here and there. And then finally in June 2012, I landed myself a permanent job again. And it felt good, and I was like, this is it. I'm back in, and I can finish my apprenticeship now, because as I say, I'm about 75% of the way there, and I just needed to get over the line. So I finally get myself a permanent job, and pretty soon after getting myself this permanent job, I absolutely hated it. It was just not a very good environment to be working in, and it was another little accountancy firm again, family run business, and I couldn't get used to it. It wasn't good, and in the back of my mind I was thinking, you're a failure. In the back of my mind I'm thinking, they're just going to sack you again. In the back of my mind I'm thinking, every time I left the room I had this awful feeling that, they're talking about me behind my back, and it was just awful. It was awful. I couldn't adjust. My mind was just so rattled, because I was thinking, are they going to sack me again? And after a while, I just kept saying to myself, like, yeah, they're going to sack you again. And I was just really paranoid. So I was working twice as hard, and it just wasn't working. So I'd come in some days at like 6:30, some days at 7:00, to try and work hard, to try and make sure that they didn't sack me. And I was just really, really trying to go for it. And lo and behold, guess what? After about a year of working there, I graduated finally. I'd completed my apprenticeship, but yes, they did let me go, and they sacked me. But part of me felt like, I don't know why, but when they sacked me, the next time, I said to myself, this is it. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And it got to 2012, and so I'm working in this firm 2012, and by 2013, I'm saying to myself, I need to do something different. I am more than just sitting behind a desk. I'm more than just sitting behind a desk. I need to work out a way of being able to get more out of me, because I'm able, I'm passionate, enthusiastic, and I've got a good attitude, but I don't think it's being used in the right area doing accounting. But that's all I know. Since I left school, for the next 3 years, I left in 2008, so by 2013 I've got 5 years doing accounting, and that's all I know. So I'm trying to work out, do I stay in accounting or do I do something else? I'm really doing a lot of soul searching at the ripe old age of 22. And I went on a mission to find out, who am I and what am I doing? So I finished this apprenticeship now, and I've just been let go of this role again. And I think to myself, right, I've got to go back to temporary contracting work. But this time I'm going back to temporary contracting work with a different attitude of, I'm just doing this just to bide my time to be able to find something else. I don't know what it is yet, but I just need to find something else. So I started looking like, with my personality, what am I good at? What am I naturally good at? Because yes, I can do accounting, but do I want to do this for the rest of my life? No. And I found coaching and personal development because my natural skills lined up with that sort of work. And so I was thinking to myself, what kind of roles are there in the world that have coaching and personal development in there? And I started looking at HR and recruitment and training and all these different kind of options. And I remember I went to London to do a 2-day course with the Coaching Academy on just to get an insight into introductory coaching. And there was about 90 people in the room, 90 people in this 2-day course. And I'm the youngest one there. I'm about 22, 23 at the time. And I remember on one of the breaks in this course, a woman by the name of Sue Miller, at the time, her name was Sue, she pulls me we're talking in the break, and she pulls me to the side and says, tell me a little bit about yourself, who are you, what are you doing here on a weekend learning about personal development? And I said, well, it's something that I want to get into in the future. I don't know if it's for me, but I like the idea of it because it just kind of matches the way I am in my personality. And she says to me, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm studying accounting. I've done my apprenticeship, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm just doing temporary jobs until I find something that I can actually do. She says, okay then, if this is something that, if coaching and training and personal development is something that you're really into, come and do a talk for my apprentices. I've got an event happening in May. And she gave me her details, and that day changed my life forever. And so I went, go back to work, doing these temporary contracts, and I'm working. But this time my attitude is so different. I'm thinking I'm starting the process of changing from where I am to where I actually want to be. I ultimately get to the stage where I'm like, so we're emailing back and forth, and this is February 2013. We're emailing back and forth, and she says, look, this is the details, this is what I want you to do, can you do this, can you do that? And I was like, yeah, I can do it all. And I was so ready to be able to make it happen. So from the date that she was doing this training event with her apprentices was in May 2013. So I met her in February, and by May 2013, I was doing this training event with her apprentices. And it was one of the best working days I've ever had in my life. I remember my alarm went off at 4 a.m. because I'm just 20 something years old. I wasn't going to drive all the way to London on, that particular day. It was in the week. I had to book off a holiday day to go and do this training, and I was up at 4 a.m. in the train station by 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then I'm in London by 8 a.m. So I got the train, and I got the train from. I just remember being, running around in my shirt and tie, my Sunday best, and I ran over to. I went to Gatwick because that's where it was being held. So I got the train from London St Pancras to Gatwick, and I got there on time. The train started at around 9:30. She wanted me there by 9 o'clock, so I got there for 9 o'clock from Derby to London by 9 o'clock. Did the training day, and it was the most fantastic day. There was about 100 apprentices in the room, and the way that it worked is myself and this woman who I've just met, we've been emailing back and forth, facilitated as well by the head of training for Hilton Hotels, because that was the company I was working with, and she and we facilitated this day, and it was a training day all about how can you get the best out of yourself as an apprentice. And at the end of the day, they did a Q&A, and there was a panel of 6 people on this Q&A, and the apprentice could ask us different questions. And it was me, this lady who's the head of head of training for Hilton Hotels, the head of Europe for training for Hilton Hotels, an apprentice who works for Hilton, and a woman from the National Apprenticeship Service. So myself, this Sue, head of Europe training, and apprentice, National Apprenticeship Service. And there was one more person as well. I think they were a former apprentice. So there were 6 of us facilitating this day. And afterwards, due to the success of that day, and I just absolutely loved it, the woman who represented the National Apprenticeship Service said to me, "Oh, tell me a little bit about yourself." I said, "Well, I work in Derby, and I've just finished my apprenticeship in accounting, and but I love doing what I've just done today." She said, "Would you like to do this more often in where you live at home, in your hometown in Derby?" I said, "Absolutely, yeah, but why not?" And so we exchanged emails, and it just absolutely kicked off from there. From when I came back to Derby, she put me in contact with somebody from Rolls-Royce. And at the time, this man from Rolls-Royce, his name was Graham, he met up with me, and I thought it was just a quick meeting, but it was actually an interview. He said, "I would like you to join my network." And I was like, "What on earth is this network?" He said it was the Apprentice Ambassador Network. And I said, "Okay, what is this all about?" And he said, "Well, we work out how to promote apprenticeships in the UK, because there's this stigma of apprenticeships just being this awful way of being able to get a job. And we believe that we can change the face of that. We believe that we can turn that around. And even though you've not had the best start, we believe that you can help us change the stigma." I said, "Okay." And I joined this network, and they said that the first meeting is going to be in September. So September 2013, I was involved in this meeting, and I'm the youngest one there again. And I was I've just turned 22, 23 maybe. And there were all these senior figures in when we went round the room and introduced ourselves in this meeting. I remember people saying, I'm the head of training for Next, and I'm the head of strategy and training for Boots, and there was loads of these huge companies in the room, and obviously this man from Rolls-Royce as well, who'd introduced me, and he said, Simeon, can you just introduce yourself? I said, I'm Simeon. I've just done my GCSEs the other day, and I'm done my apprenticeship, and I'm working full-time in accounting, and just in a temporary contract for now, but I believe, I work hard, and I'm making a difference in my apprenticeship so far, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what this network's all about to promote apprenticeships. I couldn't believe it, and I left that room, and people were kind of coming up to me and patting me on the back, saying like, "You're doing a good job, and just keep doing what you're doing," and all this kind of stuff. And then what started to happen was all these people who were in the meeting would go to these events where they would promote apprenticeships. And as I'm part of this network now, and I don't really know what it's all about and what they're really doing and how it works, but what they would do was every now and again they would go to a school, and all these older people would bring me along to say, look, this is what happens as an apprentice. This is what you can do. So I didn't tell them all necessarily the challenges that I was facing, but I would definitely talk about all the good stuff. I'll say that you earn a full-time wage, and you get experience of a hands-on approach, and you're not just sitting in the classroom learning. You're actually working part as a team, and you get to show your enthusiasm and your commitment and who you are as an individual, and you get to really develop, and you get a qualification at the end of your apprenticeship, and you learn new skills all the time. And that's what I started to do, and people would come up to me at the end and was like, oh my gosh, I never knew an apprenticeship was like that. I thought you'd only have to do an apprenticeship being a hairdresser or a bricklayer. I didn't know you could do an apprenticeship in accounting. Can I have more information? And I would give more information to the pupils and kids, and it was incredible. And what started to happen was the person who I would go with from the network would say to me, oh, we've got another event happening, would you come to this one as well? And I would have to book a holiday day and come to these events. So all my holidays just kept getting eaten up because I'm doing event after event, just promoting apprenticeships about what they can really do for people, and just say that, look, you can do apprenticeships in everything. It's not just accounting, or it's not just hairdressing and bricklaying as what it was before, and getting a trade. So over time, I started to become what we call an apprentice ambassador. And I joined this Apprenticeship Ambassador Network in 2013. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now, once I joined this network, we, as a collective, are here to change the stigma of apprenticeships, because they sometimes get a bad reputation as being quite a negative thing, but I think it's one of the best things in the world. And I wouldn't change a thing about my apprenticeship. I'm so glad I did one, because it's opened so many doors for me. And in 2013, later on that same year, I got invited to what we call the National Apprenticeship Awards, which is an award ceremony to recognise all the individual companies and the people on an individual basis who go out their way to promote apprenticeships. And I was in attendance that very first awards evening in 2013, and it was my first time going, and it was in Birmingham, and I remember getting the train, and it was a work night, so it was in the week, and before the actual ceremony itself, because it was a huge fancy do, I had no idea. I just remember turning up in a suit, and when I got to the front desk, people are handing out canapes, and there's people walking around with trays of orange juice and apple juice, and even a bit of sparkly like champagne and stuff like that. It was mental. It was crazy. And I got there, and I turned up at the front desk, and I said, look, my name is Simeon, and my name wasn't even on the list, but I had been invited. but my name was just not on the list. So I remember they made me a paper lanyard and wrote my name just in handwriting to let me in. And I was on one of the overspill tables because I hadn't got a designated seat, because everybody had all these designated seats. It was unreal. There was hundreds of people there. All the women in like nice ball gowns, and all the men were in like dicky bows and suits and tuxes. It was such a fancy event. And I remember it was the time of the coalition between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, and Nick Clegg actually was the prime minister at the time, and he addressed the whole event. And I got an opportunity after that, before this evening, to sit down with Nick Clegg and his people to talk about how apprenticeships can really change the face of the UK, and how we employ people and educate people and all this kind of stuff. And I was sat in an event with Nick Clegg while we were talking about apprenticeships. It was just one of the most surreal moments in my life, because I was thinking, I don't even know how I've managed to get myself here. And since then, I've gone on all these events where a school or a business would talk about apprenticeships, and they'd bring me along to just talk about my experiences as an apprentice. So I'd talk about my experiences. People would, change their perceptions of what an apprenticeship was all about, and that's just how it started from there. And I'm really joining this network now. And what they started to realise was all these apprentices who are out there working for all these different companies. It's not just me. There's loads of different apprentices out there and apprenticeships out there, and they need to be able to tell their story as well, because there's that many events going on now. I can't go to all of them because I'm running out of holiday days. In fact, I'm taking minus holiday days. I'm working Saturdays just to keep up with all these different events. So then what happens was, while I'm doing this as an ambassador work, 2014, I get myself a job where I was working at my current employer, and being an ambassador really helped me to get the job as well, because they see I've got a good attitude, and I'm working hard, and even though I'm doing accounting and doing apprenticeship work at the same time, I could do both. So in 2014, get myself a new job, and it's a permanent job at this time. But this time I was really excited about how it was going to pan out. So back to the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. Once we realised that there wasn't just me that could tell their story or had the opportunity to tell their story, what started to happen was they would ask me to help train some apprentices to be able to share their story, because people were coming up to me and saying that, look, I've got apprentices who work for me, and I take them to events, but they can't convey their story to the audience quite like how you do it. Can you show them how to do it? Just to be able to get their story across. And I said, okay, I can. I'm sure I can help you out in that sense. So what started to happen was I would put together these mini training sessions on how, as an apprentice, to convey your story across to make it as engaging as possible. And what started to happen was we had this collective of all these young apprentices who were able to then share their story, because they were now more confident in being able to do that, because they've got these fantastic stories about how they work hard, all the different experiences they get as an apprentice. And I'm helping them be able to share that with lots of different people so that it can inspire the next generation. And just so that people understand what apprenticeships are really all about, the good, the bad and the ugly. And it's just life. So we were doing these training sessions, and I started doing more than one. And after these apprenticeship training sessions, I was like, I think this is for me. This is what I want to do. And in the company I was working for, I was working in the accounts department, but they also had a HR and L&D and training department. And this is 2014 that I started, and in 2015 I went over to the I'm still doing these events, going to National Apprenticeship Awards and all this kind of stuff, and promoting apprenticeships, all while working full time still. And I got to the stage where it was almost like another part-time job, like doing all these apprenticeship events. And I was loving it. It was fantastic. So I'm working in accounts in this new company I'm working for, and I'm excited about it. It's going good, and I'm doing these apprenticeship events. And all of a sudden, what started to happen was this huge wave of apprentices all up and down the country were coming into schools and businesses to talk about apprenticeships. And in 2016 or 17, we launched what we call the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network, which is a group of, exactly as it sounds, young ambassadors who are current or former apprentices who will go into a school or business and just tell their story. And I was helping in the East Midlands, where I was from, how to train people in order to be able to share their story. And because, as I say, they all had these fantastic experiences. So we was doing that, and I'm still working in accounts at the time. So I was getting these experiences of delivering trainings to people, to young people, to apprentices. So I went over to L&D department in my company and said, look, this is something that I'm really passionate about. I want to know more about how do I get into L&D. I want to come and work in this department. And they said no. Her name was Claire, and she said no, you can't come work for me, you're not ready. And I said, well, what do I have to do to be ready? And she said, I want you to do this, that and the other. And she gave me a list of things to do. And I went away and I completed all. I'm not going to go into the full detail about the things that I did, because I'll do that in another podcast. But the point is, I went away, and while I'm working full time and I'm doing the apprenticeship events and I'm doing all the things that she's asking me to do, the things that she's asking me to study and look into and learn how to deliver and educate myself on what training's all about. And it took me about 3 years to work, carry on working full time, do everything she's told me to do, and helping run this network. And I came back to her and I said, look, I've done everything you told me to do. Can we have another conversation? And she says, leave it with me. I'm going to have a word with our CEO of the company and put in a case for you to come and transfer to my department. And yeah, he approved it, and the job went live and I applied for it, and I got the job, and it was fantastic, and I've been there ever since. And in my role, which is what I do currently, is I look after training and training of technical training, new starters. I look after people who are in our business, anybody who's not a senior manager basically. And within those, going forward, I actually am going to look after apprentices in our company, which really was such an incredible full turnaround, because I look, and in 2018 I got that job, and I'll still do it to this day, and even during this lockdown period. And I've just come full circle, because I remember, I look back and I think in 2010 I was training an apprentice to take my job, and I hated apprenticeships for it. And now I train apprentices for a living. And it was one of the most surreal feelings to be able to say that, look, I train, and I'm involved in apprenticeships as well, training, and I absolutely love it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. and being part of the network got so big, it was almost like it was turning into like a full-time job in itself now. So I had to make the really hard decision, because it's been part of my life and it still is part of my life. But I don't take as much of an active role as an ambassador. I'm still an ambassador to this day, but I'm not running the network as much as I used to be. Because when I was running the network, it was helping organise events, helping to allocate an apprentice to go to these events, because I had about 80 different apprentices in the East Midlands who were ready and trained to go to a school event, to go and talk about their apprenticeship story. And I was in charge of allocating who would go to these different events, because a school would ask, oh, can you send us someone in engineering, or can you send us a female who's doing engineering, or they would really be specific on who they would look for. And I would be in charge of looking out for different people who I would send. And if I couldn't go, then I would send other people, and other people would come to me and say, look, what events are happening? I would love to come. And I'd go here, there and everywhere. I'd go everywhere from Derby to Lincoln to Leicester, London, Birmingham, all these different events. And it was all out of my own time as well, because again, I wasn't doing it in work time. I was doing it out of my holiday days. So it was one of the most incredible all-round stories, and I wish I could even go into more detail about some of the things that I've been through and had the opportunities afforded to me in part as part of the network, but maybe that'll be a podcast for another day. But ultimately, I've started, as an apprentice, and I've come all the way full circle to now training apprentices, and going forward, I'm in training now, and as I say, I absolutely love it. It's my favourite thing about my role is training. When at one point I used to hate the fact that I helped train somebody to take my job, but that's it. And all I'm going to do with this podcast for apprenticeships is show the stories of how people can come from. It doesn't matter where you start, it's all about where you finish, and as long as you keep a good attitude and keep showing up, keep showing that enthusiasm and who you are, you can really make a difference and go for it. And in the next episodes coming, I will probably get interviews of different people who have gone through an apprenticeship and joined the network and made a real difference in changing the scepticism or the perceived perceptions of people who think apprenticeships are bad. But I love them, and I think they're the best things in the world, and I hope the world gets to see that as well. And that's it.